When we think about evolution, we usually picture this slow, kind of random process of mutation and survival. But what if there's something more going on? A deeper structure, maybe a hidden pattern to how life actually designs itself? Well, today, we're going to look at a fascinating new theory that might just change the way you see everything. Okay, so let's just get right to the heart of it. We're all taught that evolution is basically driven by random genetic mistakes, and nature just picks the winners. But is that really the whole story? Or could there be some kind of underlying principle, a sort of resonance, that's guiding the whole dance of life? All right, to really get our heads around this, we're going to explore a completely fresh perspective on how these hidden patterns in evolution might actually work. We all know the classic story, right? The Darwinian model. Random mutations pop up, creating all sorts of variety in a population, and then the environment, predators, climate, competition, it decides which of those traits get passed on. It's a powerful idea, and it's definitely true. But it might be missing a really crucial piece of the puzzle, a feedback loop. And this is where a totally new lens comes into play. It's called constraint resonance emergence theory. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, so we're just going to call it CREAT. And the core idea of CREAT is that evolution isn't just a one-way street of selection. It's a dynamic, two-way, resonant process. Now, the big idea here, the one that makes this all click, is emergence. Just think about a flock of birds for a second. There's no leader bird yelling out orders, right? Nope. Instead, every single bird is just following a few simple rules relative to its neighbors. And from those super simple local interactions, this complex, beautiful, large-scale pattern, the flock itself, just emerges. Kretz says, what if evolution works the same way? So Crete kind of breaks this down into three layers. First, you've got the micro level. These are the small, random changes, individual organisms just doing their thing. Then you've got the meso level. This is where those individuals interact and start to influence each other. And all of that leads to the macro level, where a big, large-scale pattern emerges that actually starts to push back and constrain the behavior of the individuals. Just like the flock's movement constrains where an individual bird can go. So what's the trigger? What makes this pattern suddenly lock into place? Well, Kretz says there's a critical threshold, a concept it calls gain. Think about it like the feedback from a microphone. Below a certain point, it's just quiet static. But once that gain hits a value of 1 or more, the feedback loop becomes self-sustaining, and you get that loud, clear, resonant hum. In the exact same way, when the feedback between the micro and macro levels in a system hits that critical point, the whole thing snaps into a stable state. A coherent pattern emerges from all the noise. Okay, so we've got this idea of emergence and this gain trigger. But how does this apply directly to the nuts and bolts of evolution? Let's connect the dots. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we can translate CRET directly into biology. That micro level, that's our familiar genetic variation, those random mutations happening all the time. The meso level is how populations are actually structured, how they interact through competition or gene flow. And the macro level, well, that's the emergent evolutionary landscape itself. It's the overall structure of the environment and the available niches that constrain which traits can possibly succeed. And this, right here, is the feedback loop in action. You've got what's called upward amplification, where all those little individual genetic changes are bubbling up. But at the same time, you have downward selection, where that macro-level environment is pushing back, constraining and shaping which of those changes actually get to stick around. It's this constant, dynamic conversation between the genes and their world. And that brings us right back to that idea of gain, that critical point. When the feedback is weak, when the gain is less than 1, mutations just kind of wander around aimlessly. We call that random genetic drift. But when that feedback gets strong, when that gain hits 1, the system finds its resonance. Suddenly, adaptive pressures accelerate innovation, and stable, large-scale patterns can just pop into existence. Okay, so the theory sounds amazing, right? But does it actually hold up in the real world? Let's take a look at a couple of classic examples from nature and see CREAT in action. Predator-prey dynamics are a perfect example of this whole resonance idea. At the micro level, you've just got individual animals hunting and trying not to get eaten. Their interactions create a mesostructure, basically how the predator population reacts to how much food is available. And out of all that, a macro constraint emerges, that big, overarching ecological cycle that ends up governing both populations. So you start here. Let's say you've got a ton of prey running around. It's a paradise for predators, right? Their population is still low, but with all this food, it's about to boo. And that, of course, leads to this. The predator population explodes, which in turn causes the prey population to just crash. And now, with way less food, the predator population starts to decline, which lets the prey recover, and the whole cycle starts all over again. It's a stable, rhythmic, resonant oscillation. So you see, the big takeaway here is that this isn't just a simple chase. That co-evolutionary arms race, prey getting faster, predators getting smarter, that whole thing is itself an emergent resonant pattern. It's a dynamic dance that actually maintains the stability of the entire system. All right, let's switch gears and look at symbiosis. You start with two totally separate species. They might interact here and there, but their evolutionary fates are not tied together at all. The feedback between them is super weak. The gain is way less than one. But what happens when that feedback gets stronger? When their survival becomes so intertwined that the informational flow between them becomes symmetric, meaning what organism A does has a direct and equal impact on organism B, and vice versa. Well, according to Kret, their fates become locked together. They phase lock, and a brand new single macro-level entity emerges, like lichen, which is a fungus and an alga, or coral. It's a new whole. So look, this is a really elegant, beautiful way of describing nature. But what makes a theory truly powerful? The fact that it makes predictions we can actually go out and test. And get this, Kret makes some seriously bold predictions. For one, it says we should be able to find and even measure evolutionary tipping points, those moments where the gain hits one and you get these rapid bursts of change. It also suggests that in a stable ecosystem, the information flowing from the genes to the environment should be pretty much balanced by the information flowing back. But maybe the wildest prediction is this. A big, sudden shock to the environment should be able to break apart a symbiotic relationship, that macrostructure, faster than it can change the underlying genes of the individual organisms. That is a very specific and very testable claim. So if you're going to take away just one sentence from all of this, let it be this one. This theory reframes the whole game. Evolution is the constraint, resonance of genetic microfluctuations with ecological macro pressures. It's the hum that emerges between the tiny and the vast. And this is the real mindbender, okay? In this view, evolution isn't just some background process that acts on things. Evolution is the emergent phenomenon. It is the primary, self-sustaining pattern that arises when life and its environment finally lock into a state of resonance. And that just leaves you wondering, right? If this principle of constraint resonance can describe the evolution of life itself, what else can it describe? Think about economies, or cultures, or maybe even consciousness. What other complex systems are out there just waiting for us to find their hidden resonant frequency?